All right. Good morning, California. Good morning, East Coast, and good evening, Botswana. Welcome to today's webinar, Agile Strategy Execution, Revolutionizing the How. For your information, we are recording this webinar. And before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items so you know how to participate in today's event. Today's event is going to be 1 hour, and all participants are in listen-only mode. We've taken a screenshot here so you can see an example of the interface. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions for today's presenter by typing your questions into the question pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. For those of you who participate and provide questions, we will have a drawing at the end for a free book. So we want to mention that we're thrilled to announce that Cameron Slater won one of the free books for early registration, and we will be sending these books out this week. Allow me to tell you a little bit about Cobblestone Consulting. For over 16 years, we're dedicated to delivering our customers exceptional value. As an experienced business and technology consulting firm, we understand that business agility is important. We pride ourselves in bringing cutting-edge solutions to help our customers run smart business. Our cutting-edge solutions reside within our 4 lines of business to include strategy, project portfolio management, training, and custom software development. Over the past decade, we have been assisting clients in aligning strategy and project portfolio management, therefore making sure that the right work is being completed to achieve strategic results. We continue to see a misalignment, therefore we bring you this webinar to share a possible framework. Allow me to introduce myself and my colleague, Cindy Cardoso. I am Lori Bacopoulos, CEO and founder of Cobblestone Consulting, based out of Atlanta, Georgia, and we support a variety of industries to include private, nonprofit, energy, and higher education. Cindy, who's with me today, is our strategic solutions consultant with experience in managing and deploying projects, creating technology plans, and designing innovative solutions. And Cindy, thank you for joining us today and helping us with the webinar.
You're welcome, and hello and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining.
Excellent. Now it's time for me to introduce our speaker, Alan Leeds. I met Alan many years ago as we serve on the board of the Association for Strategic Planning. I found Alan extremely knowledgeable, and when I found out he was a professional magician, I was really impressed. Now, when he took me to the Magic Castle in LA, it was an amazing experience, and it was so much fun. His creativity with magic, coupled with his broad business experience, made us a really good match. Alan engaged me to assist him by implementing the Agile strategy execution model in one of his clients. The result was alignment and visibility of their strategy. When he shared with me his book idea and asked me to participate by reviewing the book, I jumped on the opportunity. From my perspective, this powerful framework will really bridge the gap between strategy and execution. Alan, thank you for being our special guest today, and we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you, Lori. So welcome, good afternoon, good evening, good morning to people. What we're going to be talking about today is Agile strategy execution. Our objectives are threefold. The first is a little bit of an understanding of what it means to be Agile. And how do you take that and the concepts from Agile and execute it into your strategy execution process. The second is to see how this framework can help leaders and practitioners like yourselves execute that strategy. and do it in an aligned, accountable, and responsive manner. And the third is to let you shut down the webinar, go back to your company, and say, hey, these are some tools I have, I need to look for, or I already use, and use them starting tomorrow in your organization. It's based on what we're calling the Agile Strategy Execution Framework, which is what we'll be talking about and is part of our agenda. So our agenda is to talk about the definition of Agile Strategy Execution, the problems. We're then going to be talking about the different framework components, and then go through each of those 6 components in more detail. There are some influencing factors which we're not going to be covering in this webinar. We'll be covering another webinar, though you can read it in a book called Agile Strategy Execution, available on Amazon. We're going to then summarize it, wrap up, talk about the 6 steps, and talk about possibly a way of getting started through a maturity analysis. We're then going to open it up for questions and answers. So with that, let me get started in defining what strategy execution is. In order to get started, the first thing I did was looked up Wikipedia and said, well, gee, what is strategy execution? And it wasn't very helpful. It came up with a plan of action or policy designed to achieve a major or overall aim. The book called Execution by Bossidy and Charon, I thought did a much better job, and it talked about a systematic way of exposing reality and acting on it. So to expose reality and acting on it, is it a problem? And as I'm sure you're all aware, there's a lot of facts out there saying that strategy execution is a huge problem. A couple of the numbers are here. We'll be sending you a copy of the presentation so you can have it for yourselves. But basically, 9% of the companies are rated excellent at strategy execution. And if you look at the last bottom right one, 11% of managers believe that all their company's strategic priorities have the financial and human resources needed for success. So we're finding a lot of people feel that strategy execution is a problem. It's not being done well. But then we have a lot of people, a lot of you included here, that are in charge of executing strategy or leading strategy execution. And what's worse is if you look at it, strategy, if you come up with a great strategy, well, gee, you get a lot of trophies, you get a lot of accolades, you get in the news. How about the lost souls that execute strategy? Well, you don't see the New York Times talking about, hey, so-and-so executed their strategy. And that, I think, is a problem, is that you have a lot of unsung heroes that are actually in the trenches executing strategy, but people get paid for actual strategy development. So what we feel is that strategy execution needs to be made a priority. Not said that we need to do it better, but that it has to be a priority to different companies. So we're redefining strategy then as translating strategy into a reality that is aligned, accountable, and responsive. So that's our new definition of strategy execution, making sure that you're taking that strategy and making sure that it's being deployed in the organization. So what do we mean by aligned, accountable, and responsive? In aligned, what we're talking about, the goals, strategy, and initiatives are linked and coordinated. So the top of the organization strategies, the bottom level initiatives and projects are linked and coordinated. There's processes exist to coordinate and integrate the department and the organizational plans, horizontally and vertically in the organization. And all breakthrough and run the business projects and activities must cascade from their linked goals, strategies, and initiatives. We're saying that it needs to be accountable, that the organizations have employees that have direct line of sight to the goals, and they can see the interconnectedness as their strategy, as their role and their contribution. The culture supports this, and that you're regularly measuring the outcomes and the results of that. These two areas are things that a lot of people have talked about. There's a lot of great books on it. There's a gentleman on the call right now, William Malik, that's written about that, helped form a company called IPS. What we're suggesting is that they also need to be agile in a way that is responsive, that you constantly need to adapt and realign the changing internal, external landscape conditions to the strategy. You need to have a feedback loop, making sure it's getting in real time online. There has to be cross-departmental objectives and actions and metrics that real time are talked about and decisions are made. And that the performance measurement KPIs are transparent for the organization, understood, and tied to the actual goals of the organization. So this is how we're defining Agile strategy execution. It's aligned to the organization, it's accountable for all people in the organization, and it's responsive to the outgoing and ongoing happenings on the world. So that's great. You have a strategy plan, you know your results, and you want to get there. So what we've seen is that there's a plethora of different tools, techniques, concepts out there. You have objectives, you have initiatives, and you have tactics. Then you combine that with a lot of different tools like Hoshin planning, Cascade, scorecards, project management. You then overlay that with departmental plans, strategy updates, and refinement. And then you have the culture and the alignment to worry about. And what we're saying is, with all these tools, techniques, and processes, is it a sustainable process? And what we're suggesting is, why not put all this together in a framework, in a way you could show it to people and organize all this information? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. That's what we're suggesting. Coming up with a framework by which you can take your plans and your metrics, you can align them, you can have real-time updates, you make decisions based on your organization, you have bets on innovation, so you're constantly putting in new ideas, and then you're refreshing and transforming. This, of course, overlaid into the culture that you're working on and connected governance. So what we're suggesting is the benefits of an Agile strategy framework would be that it's inclusive. We're not saying this tool, this technique doesn't work, isn't part of it. What we're suggesting is put it in a framework, put it in one of these buckets so that you can take it and show people how it's part of the process, how it's used. It's part of the best processes. The second is that it's strict in its intent in the sense that you need to use these types of 6 framework areas, but it's flexible in what you want to work on. It's flexible in delivery style. And you can measure the success by looking at each discrete areas. You can find out if you're doing good on innovation. You can find out good if you're doing aligning and linking. And finally, each one of these dimensions can be worked separately. So there's no reason you can't work on the plans and the metrics, yet still work on the reporting that goes on in the organization. So we're suggesting not to throw out your tool chest, we're suggesting you just organize it a little bit better and have it as a framework and a way that people can see this is what I'm doing. So what we're talking about then is we're talking about a way of defining what the strategy is, coordinating the tools, and then putting the concepts in a framework. Lori? So what we have here...
Thank you, Alan. Yeah,
okay.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so now we'd like to ask everyone to participate in a poll, and we'll give you about 10 seconds to think about which of these concepts best resonate with you. Strategy execution, definition, sustainability with tools and techniques, and need for an easily understood integrating framework. So go ahead and take a moment to give us your feedback.
Okay, we're going to be closing the poll. Thank you.
Excellent. I'd like to share some of the results. All right. So it looks like 56% of us need for an easily understood integrating framework. So that's very important, such that we have, a framework to deploy throughout our organization. And then 31% of us have the sustainability of a plethora of tools and techniques. And then finally, 13% strategy execution definition. So the great thing is, as Alan moves forward in the presentation, we will understand a little bit more about how this framework could be applicable to many of you. So thank you for taking that poll. And we do have one other poll that we'd like to share with you. And that is, what do you think about applying Agile concepts to strategy execution? So if you could take 10 more seconds to share with us your thoughts there again. Definitely a good idea, something not sure yet, or not really. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are. And our results, so excellent. 92% of you think it's a great idea. So thank you for sharing that with us. And Alan, thank you for defining these various areas of the framework for us.
Okay,
I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Lori. I'm really happy to hear that 56% felt it was good to have a framework, because if it was much lower, we wouldn't have a reason to keep talking. So let me go through that framework. The first step of the framework is called plans and metrics. For each part of it, we've come up with a definition, we've come up with methods, and we're going to talk about different results. So the framework is the first one is a plans and metrics, and it's a way of translating organizational goals, objectives, and strategies into initiatives, tactics, and metrics. And there's many methods for it. And most of you on the call are very aware of these methods. My suggestion is pick one or two of the ones that you think are good and work on those. A couple of ones I'm sure you're all aware of is Hoshin planning. There's one person on the call I actually did this with, and it's taking a look at what's the best way of taking a look at where we are, which are the key processes, how much and when, and then breakthrough. So the Hoshin planning concept is really the concept that started this many, many years ago. GoQPC introduced it to the United States. The problem with the framework is it's very difficult to do several levels at one time. It's easy to do one or two levels, but when you get to more, when you're starting doing matrices and A4 matrices, it gets a little complex. There's something called organization goals, strategies, and metrics. So you have the objectives here. This is something used in the food industry. It's a way of taking that Hoshin planning and putting a little more depth onto it, making sure the metrics and the measures are tied to it. Another way of looking at this is OKRs. This is something that came to light obviously through Intel, and Google uses it a lot very informally but structured. And it's a way of saying, let's not get involved in all the detail. Let's figure out a way of doing this agilely. So every month people say, this is what I need to do based on a quarterly goal, and then every month, how am I doing on the key results? And then they measure how well on a scale of 1 to 10 it's going. The whole point of this is not that you're not doing well on it. The point is, what are the barriers we need to do in order to make it easier to do? At our ASP conference in May of this year, we have someone talking about the OKRs. It's a very good way of taking a look individually at what the goals and objectives are for an organization. Another way, of course, is the balanced scorecard. Very traditional way of taking a look at your metrics, your key process indicators, tying them to some sort of scorecard that makes sense in order to make sure that what you're measuring is tied to a way of looking at it from an organizational point of view and tied to the vision and strategy. This is another way of doing it. This is based on a digital tool where what you would look at for an organization is your primary links. So this is your boss, your management. This is your way of organizing things, maybe by a balanced scorecard. From that, you take a look at what are the goals and metrics for it. This is the metrics part. So you can see, for instance, that you're looking at a certain thing like reducing overall expenses. Well, what am I doing in my department, in my operations area? What am I doing to reduce my product lines, making sure my revenue is coming from new products? And then finally from this, what we're tying it to is the details of your plan. What are you doing? What's it linked to? What's the due date? What's the owner? What's the progress? What's all the information we need for it? So this might be one area of plan, like operations. We can see what we're doing based on what we need to do for our management. We can see how to measure it. But we also have something else here. We have secondary links. Why do we only have to tie it to our manager? Maybe we need to tie it to customer satisfaction. So what is everybody doing in customer satisfaction? And you could take a look at by links here, those things that are linked to customer satisfaction as well. Another way of doing it, borrowed again from the Agile way in software development, is a sprint team board. There's one organization that's actually on the call right now, and they're moving from ISO 2008 to 2015. And they have a lot of standards. And they're saying, okay, these are our backlog of all the standards we have. Now, instead of taking a look and breaking it down by quarter, we're just going to say this is the queue for Q1, and then this is what we're going to do in Q1. We might not have anything in Q2 yet. And then as things get complete, we put it here. So this is a simple way of having a Kanban board, taking a look at what needs to happen, saying we need to look at things for Q1, maybe not have anything for Q1, and as they get complete, they put over here. And then we're driving from a backlog, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Another way of looking at coming up with a plan for an organization. Of course, scorecards are very important. This is another view of a scorecard where you need to take a look at in a department or for the organization, how are we doing on the plans? This is our initiative status. This is how many are red, yellow, or green. This is how many are overdue for the month. This is how many we've completed. And this is our backlog. And we can take a look at it from more of an agile way. This is what we're doing for the quarter, what needs to be done. We can then look at the action status, the same thing. And the same way, we can take a look at what the projects are doing. Because in my area, not only do I have initiatives, but I have statuses. I have project statuses I need to look at as also. So we're talking about a definition of a way of translating organization goals. We have many methods. And of course, the reason we're doing these methods is to have these outcomes. We're broken into manageable components. We have transparency, a single source of truth. They're smart, specific, measurable, achievable for both initiatives and projects, and the metrics are tied to critical objectives. So we've defined our plans and metrics. Now what we need to do is align and link them. And what that means is to make sure that the operating plans are cascaded, aligned, and linked vertically and cross-functionally, driving actions. Many different ways of doing it. There's something called a relevancy assessment we can look at, the idea of a cascade primary, secondary, and what Hoshin planning calls catchball. This is a traditional cascade where we're taking a company, cascading the group and the department, down to programs, and then reporting up. It's traditional in the sense that it's a way of doing it. The problem many organizations have with it is it aligned, accountable, and responsive? Responsive, we mean if we go through this whole process every quarter, by the end of the quarter, are we actually working on it or just making sure that everything's aligned? So we're suggesting that we need alignment, but is there a better way? One better way of doing it is have the same ideas, have the financial, the reduce overall expenses, and have reduced major product lines going down to a project. But if there's a change here, if the overall expenses are not being reduced by 25%, do we need to change what the different operations is doing? So consumer products is saying we need to reduce it here, but if they're saying it's working or not working, do we need to then change the financial goals? So how do we do this catchball where everybody's looking at their things, yet it's tied together? So by doing aligning and linking, what we're suggesting is by everybody having the same language and taxonomy, we're all on the same plane. We have the line of sight like we saw before. We have the horizontal and vertical feedback. And we can take a look at those unsupported initiatives, those things that are plans that are not tied to projects, or there are projects not tied to the initiatives. After we define the plan, after we link them, we're suggesting there needs to be real-time updates. And we're talking about a single source of truth that triggers properly prioritized and scheduled work. So let me give you an example of this. This is online, so I'm allowed to present it. This is in 2014. Google Manager had an email going out saying missing OKRs. It was done by a gentleman named Jonathan Rosenberg. It's hard to read, so I just highlighted some of it. He sent an email out to his staff saying our performance in OKRs this quarter was poor. 9 PMs have still not posted their 4-quarter OKRs out of 582. The offenders are listed below. He listed them all, and he said, for now, I recommend we all torture the offenders below by asking them in the halls why the heck are they late on their OKRs. Now, I know Google doesn't actually believe in torture, but I think the humor in this is very important. He was basically finding out that people are not filling them out, or some weren't. These are the guilty parties. So why isn't there a way of getting a culture in your company to say it's okay to report how people are doing on the strategies and who's not looking at it? Another way of doing it, real-time updates, is a very simple scorecard in an organization chart where you can say increasing impact is green, and below that you can see that Tom Slatke in the ASQ also is doing these strategies, and it's green as well. Or it might be red. So you have improved processes and operations by ASQ. You can take a look down here to assess and configure their strategies, and you can find out what tactics are not being done. Very easily drilling down, seeing real time what's happening, what's yellow, what needs to work on. The objective here is just to show you a couple of tools and techniques to make sure that we're using these real-time updates and getting the results we need. Why? Well, we have improved decision-making quality and reduced cycle time. We have organizational departmental team, personalized collaboration and reporting, and the objective tactics and projects. We're doing them the right things, and we're doing them right. After we do the real-time updates, what we're suggesting is looking at making action, making a cadence review system. And what the goal is to ensure real-time resourcing and course corrections and managing priorities and the backlog. So what we're suggesting is you have certain things you need to do for the quarter, and you need to decide which ones can happen for a variety of reasons. If it can happen, why not bring up the next one? Work on that one, put that one on hold, or go back to the one that's not being done well, add some more resources to it. Many methods for it. There's decision meetings that you have. The Rockefeller concepts are very important here, but not informed meetings. You don't want to have a meeting and say, okay, this is where we are in the strategy. This is where we are in the tactics. What we're suggesting is that should have been done before on the individual updates. This is a time when we're acting. We're identifying and prioritizing actions. A lot of organizations are reprioritizing the backlog through a SKS approach, which means this is what we stop, this is what we keep, and this is what we start. Is this important? Well, this is a gentleman named John Inmelt. He's the chairman of the board of GE, and let's look at what he has to say.
Just getting IT tools that were contemporary in a mobile setting, and we call these things the culture of simplification. So, you know, my notion is we're in a permanently complex world. And this historical organization chart with lots of processes, that's kind of a thing of the past. We basically unplugged anything that was annual. So the notion is, in the digital age, sitting down once a year to do anything is weird. It's just bizarre. So we basically, you know, whether it's doing business reviews or strategic planning, we're in a much more continuous way. We still give a lot of feedback. We still do a lot of how you're performing, but we make it much more contemporary and much more 360. So somebody can get interactions with their boss on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, and the data you get is being collected by your peers, the people that work for you, in a much more accurate and fluid way.
So that's Jeff talking a little bit about what's needed going forward. So how would you do this? How would you get a cadence? So this is an example from a company. It's a small company, excuse me, about $20 million. And they have to do, and what they do is they help dealerships in automotive industries look at the tools and techniques they use. It's a software development house. They do conferences. And this is their chart of their meetings cascade. They have plans and metrics. They have aligning and link. These are our dimensions. In the cadence decision, the purpose is to ensure appropriate resourcing and course corrections. So how do they do that? The first thing they do is they have daily informal discussions. So among their team, they're discussing what needs to happen. They have a weekly sprint meeting. What it means is they get together on a Kanban board and they say, hey, this is where we are. This is what's ahead. This is what's behind. This is what we need to pull up. On a monthly case, then what they have is they have, or twice a month, a backlog adjustment. They say we're behind. The sprint meeting here said this is behind, this is ahead. This is what we're going to do. So they put together what they need to do for a monthly meeting. And then every quarter they get together, and each of the departments come together and say, you know, I'm behind on this. I know I talked to you, Joe, in this department. As you know, we have a problem here. What are some of our solutions? And they have a problem-solving solution based on all the different departments to decide what's happening. So this is an example where an organization has put together a meeting cadence. And they've said, these are our dimensions. This is what we're going to do. This is who's responsible. It's kind of like a RACI chart, but based on strategy execution. This is another example of what might go on in one of those cadence meetings. As you see down here, there's an epic. And an epic is basically, this is the project. This is the key components of that project that we said we'd be doing. And what we might find is that one of these options, and I put fictitious names, so Lori isn't the one to go yell at for this, but you can see that the planned end date has now been pushed. And what happens is this green task now is now red. Now, traditionally, if a project has a problem and it's within a line of sight of the organization, how do they find out about it? Well, in this quarterly meeting, what they can say is, hey, our Big Sandy project based on this epic and this task that's behind is behind. What do we need to do? They've talked to the operations group and said, hey, sorry, we're in manufacturing, this is behind. Do you need to change what's happening here? And not only do they do that, they ask the consumer products organization or tell them, hey, we are in jeopardy. We're not going to be able to reduce our defects and our costs by 15%. Do you want to change your overall expenses by 25%? Is that still good? And they say a couple of curse words. They decide they need to change it. And then what happens is they need to get to the department that's ahead of them saying, hey, consumer products, our financial numbers are in jeopardy. What do you want to do? Do you want to put more resources on? Are there any SKS, stop, keep, start activities? This is what we're suggesting in a meeting. It's not a meeting to say we're behind. It's to decide what we need to do here. We need to tell Lori that she needs to get on the stick, give her more resources, or we need to take a look at the Big Sandy project, or we need to pull in another project in order to make it happen. So this is an example of a cadence decision that's being made with real-time online data. So what we're saying, your cadence decisions need to have objectives and initiatives broken down into manageable components. The software people call it epics and stories. Again, what we're suggesting is use the language in your organization. Doesn't really matter, but the point is break it down so people can see those manageable components. You have real-time refinement and you have pivoting of those initiatives and tactics to stay on track. You have work completed, delivered, and evaluated regularly. So you don't have quarterly goals and objectives and then have initiatives that have to be done by the end of the year. Our suggestion is that your initiatives need to be as many as you do in the first quarter as second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter. If your initiatives are fourth quarter end results, break it down so people can see what you need to do every quarter. You need to institutionalize the process of prioritization and backlog. And make sure that you're strengthening organization ability and responsiveness. So the fourth step is to take your cadence decisions, which every company has, ensure everybody knows what it is, and make sure it's action-oriented. So you're making your actions, things are happening, that's great, but where do you implement and deploy new ideas? How do you get new ideas into the process? So there's a company I won't mention called Intel. And 2001, their strategy, because they didn't have a lot of strategists, was to make Grove principle of every year double the amount of resistors, transistors, and double the density. So it had Moore's law. And Moore's law was what drove Intel. And it was great because every year they come up with their new processor. I'm staring at my computer that says Intel inside. But what happened around 2001 is that you had the iPad. You had other types of platforms that people were going to, and Intel was not inside. They got very upset. They hired a bunch of strategy consultants, and they came up with the idea of coming up with market watch opportunities every quarter. So they had innovation meetings, and they said, sure, we need to know how we're doing on our deliberate strategies, what we're doing. That's very important, no question about it. But are there emerging strategies we need to consider? What impact would they have on our strategies? Is our business model correct? Those are the things we need to do. So a recent example of this market watch was, I don't know if you've looked, but they won the Guinness Book of World Records for the number of drones in one place. And the commercial was that they had, I don't know, 150 or so drones in a small area over a field with a symphony orchestra playing some music, and these drones moved around, shine lights, they had a nice light show, and at the end it spelled Intel. Why did they do that? Because they were behind, they felt, in the perceived space of getting their technology into the high schools, the colleges that were doing it. They wanted to show they were in the forefront by doing it. There's a lot of other market watches that they did. That's one example. And it showed how Intel then propelled themselves, skipping the iPhones, etc., going on to the next area, which are drones and everything else like that. So the idea of these quarterly meetings, looking at emerging strategies, business model correct, and our budgets, was to make sure that we're getting new ideas into the process. Some companies budget a certain amount of money to try some new ideas. Some companies have to do it within their own quarterly budget when they're a department. My own personal feeling is that doesn't go as well. But look at the innovation bets. Look at the small things we need to do, and then on a quarterly basis, make those changes. Many different tools for it. There are system approach types of things. There's a gentleman who wrote a new book on it. Jim Vendrowski's on the call right now, looking at pushing beyond the 9 dots. Talk to him or get his new book when he goes on it. But coming up with what the breakthrough areas are, what creative leaps do we need to have? This is an example of a fantasy wine opener. What concepts do we have? And then look at the potential, high, medium, and low. Rate them, decide what are innovation bets that work, that we need to focus on, then come up with a strategic action plan for it. So the innovation bets is to have an organization focus on ongoing innovation. Does that have to be something for the whole organization? No, it could be a departmental idea. Come up with a process and an environment for agile innovation and refine our business model if we need to. After we've done these 5 steps, we're back to coming up with refreshing and transforming our strategy. Coming up with a formal reassessment, coming up with our normal traditional SWOTs, many activities here. I don't want to go through all the different ideas on it, but it's the typical way of refreshing a strategic plan for the next year. Can this be done more than on a yearly basis, on a quarter? Absolutely. It's very difficult right now because people are saying we're on an annual strategic plan basis, we're doing this, but organizations now, as Jeff Inmelt said, they're doing it on a quarterly basis. So what we're talking about on a refresh and transform is to improve decision-making cycle time, having agile course corrections, review and assess the value proposition, and improve the strategy, return on investment, and the time to value assessment. So what we've presented in the last half an hour or so is a framework by which one dimension was plan and metrics, making sure that we're all coming up with a disciplined approach and focusing on breakthrough objectives. Now, as you all mentioned or voted on in the strategy, 91% of you felt we needed 51% felt we needed a framework. So we're suggesting again, come up with a framework. If you're still working on plans and metrics, that's fine. If you're ready for the next step and you want to align and link them, by all means, start aligning and link them. Make sure to run the business activities, process improvements, use catchball, and make sure you're aligning and linking projects to it as well. Making sure you're doing real-time updates. This doesn't have to be done in a meeting. This is something now you can do digitally online. You saw a lot of examples. and making sure you have day-to-day triggers to make sure that if something is going behind, there's a trigger so management knows. That, of course, leads to the cadence decisions, which are done at least quarterly, where you're saying, hey, we need to have bigger mid-course corrections, making decisions, start, keep, start, stop. Make sure your innovation bets, your ideas are doing it. Every department should be looking at their innovation bets. What can they do differently? Step outside the box. And then, of course, reinforce, refresh, and transform your strategy. Two areas that are not part of this discussion today, which will be part of another webinar, is how do we change our culture? You know, what's formal, what's informal? How do we manage this culture? The Agile software development, which is now in Agile project management, is very big on the culture. They have a lot of tools. You have a lot of tools you've used in culture. And of course, you need to have a connected governance method. You need to have a way that you can take your leadership processes and you're actually measuring and monitoring process for this. So for that, I would like to stop here for a second, do another reality check. I want to find out what you all think. So Lori?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Great stuff. And I wanted to just point out, everyone, that it's time to do a poll, and we're close to the end of our presentation, so we want to make sure you engage and send us your questions. We don't have any questions as of yet. And anybody who sends in questions, again, you have the opportunity to win the Agile Strategy Execution Revolutionizing the How book. So let's send us your questions. And Alan, you know, this is awesome. We just like you said in the last poll, everyone said they really needed a framework that they could leverage and understand, and you've gone through the 6 areas. Now, everyone on the phone, if you don't mind, take a moment. We're going to do another poll. We'd love to hear from you. Now that you've heard what each of these, how these work together to really provide a strong framework, let us know which of these items, you know, provide the biggest pain point for your organization. So again, let us know your thoughts. We'll give you about 10 seconds to give us your feedback. You know, again, aligning and linking is a great opportunity for folks in the organization to really understand what's going on, you know, in the various departments, and really reducing any type of duplicate work. All right, so our poll is closed, and our results show a tie between aligning and linking and real-time updates, followed by cadence decisions. So like I mentioned, you know, real-time updates are fantastic so that you can quickly adjust in your organization so that you can make sure that people are working on the right things to drive your strategic objectives. Fantastic. Thank you all for participating. We do have one more poll for you, and that is, you know, would your organization benefit from deploying this framework? If you could give us your feedback, we greatly appreciate it. So again, another 10 seconds to let us know your thoughts on this. Again, you know, we've seen a lot of Agile in the software development arena, and this concept to bring this same, you know, visibility and cadence to strategy just makes really great sense, considering, you know, we've always kind of been hearing the executives create the strategy and then it's on the shelf. So it's important to bring that to the organization to really visualize that line of sight. So thank you all. Look, 62%, absolutely. So fantastic, and some folks are not sure yet. So Alan, did you have any, you know, some of the things that I've noticed that are really helpful is if you don't really know yet, you could always, you know, conduct an assessment on your strategic maturity, and that sometimes helps. Alan, I'll send it back to you.
Sure. Thanks, Lori. I'll talk about the assessment in a second. What I noticed different about this group, which I think we did a similar thing for the Association for Strategic Planning, a webinar, and most people were at the the first step of coming up with plans and metrics, and the number there was like 80% there. I think a lot of you are on your journey towards better strategy, and it is heartening to see actually that 38% felt the aligning, but a lot of people are on the real-time updates. The last group was not quite yet at the real-time updates. They were still trying to get their organization to go. My suggestion for those that felt you're not sure yet, 38%, I feel you need a framework. Whether you use this framework or your own framework, it doesn't really matter. All my suggestion is, if you're going to do strategy execution, let the organization know this is the way you're going to do it. If you don't like the word framework, come up with something else. But if you don't have a path to get to New York City, any path will do. Lori mentioned, would your organization benefit, and how do you get started, and if you're not sure. There's something called the Agile Strategy Maturity, or you can come up with your own maturity grid. CMMI has a grid. If you remember, quality is free long back again. There are a lot of maturity grids. But why not come up with a grid to take a look at how your organization is? And you can do it by a department, or you can do it by the organization. You would look at categories, and you would look at levels. So if we took the idea of aligned, accountable, and responsive as the Agile strategy framework, with the idea of creating your strategy, and then come up with the maturity levels from task, managed, and integrated, you could take each department and see how well they're doing. So you can say for the creation, I'm at the integrated stage. In responsive, I'm only on the task phase. And where I want to be this quarter or this year is here. Look at the gaps and work on it. And then what it is a matter of taking a look at what those words are or those exemplars are. For instance, if I want to align my strategy from task-oriented, selected plans and activities aligned and linked to my organization plans. That's my task-oriented level. In managed, I have a formal process to make the activities aligned and linked. Here, integrated, I have transparent real-time coordination. And finally, in aligned, not only do I have integration, but I have triggering activity. So this is a case where an organization or a department can say, hey, in aligned, I have a formal process. What I want to do is I want to make it transparent in real time. This might give you the information necessary in order to make your plan accountable and responsive, or let the organization know what their health is now and what you're striving for. So these are some benefits we see of the organization execution strategy framework, and a framework for it enables inclusion of deployed methodologies. Again, we're not suggesting any methodologies. We're suggesting that you come up with the methodologies that you think are working or could work or are working. Tie those into your projects and portfolios. Talk to William Malik if you have any questions on that. He's written several books on that. You need greater flexibility to anticipate and respond to change. You have to accommodate aligned and accountable digital processes. You can do this on Excel, but if you can go digitally, I think it'll have a lot more momentum and get things happening quicker. And use something like a maturity model to assess where you are, benchmark where you are, and let people see what the process is. There was a study done by an organization called 2080, which was recently bought out IPS, which William Malik actually was the one that organized and ran for many years with Stanford Development. And they came up with their 2000 top strategy execution trends. And they had 2016. 3 weeks ago, they came up with their 2017. I was glad to see it because if you look at it, excuse me, their number one trend was the birth of one meta process and one meta practice. So the lines were blurred between strategy execution and project management. I would suggest the lines need to be blurred between strategy execution in the different framework stages, from developing it, from departments to organization. The second they said was digitization, adoption of technology to drive business processes. The third was they need change managers. And that's for everybody, I think, on the call. Whether you're a consultant, whether you're in the trenches, or whether you're a strategy consultant, you need to have people for innovation. You need to be able to invest in project management as a change management strategy and make sure that you're actually working and coaching the organizations. Numbers 5 and 7 were focused on the benefit and values management. Sure, are we doing strategy execution to do strategy execution, or are we doing it to move the needle? Are we doing it for goals and objectives that have metrics assigned to it? So my suggestion is at all levels, make sure you're showing the metrics, make sure you have at least one metric per department, and yet those metrics are tied to the organization strategy and the projects. The last one, number 10, they had the top 20. The top one of their top 10 was Agile is not for IT anymore. So I was glad to see that, since that's kind of what the process and the premise of our talk today is you need to have Agile working in strategy. It might be too hard to use those words right now in many organizations, but take a lot of the flexibility in the concepts and see if it can be applied to it. So our conclusion is there is no magic. No, we are suggesting that there needs to be a framework for your organization. Whether you adapt this framework another way, it needs to happen. So strategy execution has been around a long time, but we feel that you need to add some agility. We can adopt Agile best practices as needed, and we can do it one piece at a time. You don't need to do all of this. You can work on innovation bets, and you can work on alignment and linking, depending upon which organization, which department is ready for it. A top-driven culture is needed, but it's everybody's job. And finally, what we feel is strategy without a framework for execution is hallucination. And I took that from Thomas Edison. So, questions you might have?
Excellent. Great job, Alan. And we do have some questions. The first one is from Vishal Singh. So I hope I didn't butcher that too badly. But his question is, in IT, SDLC has been managed by waterfall or agile methods. Are there certain types of organizations that use the waterfall method? What are the challenges of implementing agile strategy execution framework in big organizations?
Okay, I think there's two questions there. The first is, many organizations that are software driven have really thrown out agile, have thrown out the waterfall idea. Organizations that are more systems thinking organizations, or big military or companies that have large projects, feel that you need to have EVA, earned value, and you need to have a waterfall approach. I think what we're seeing now is we're seeing a balance. We're seeing the needle move in the middle. So you can have a waterfall approach, but what you're doing is you're managing and monitoring that on a quarterly basis. Big organizations have bigger problems trying to implement Agile. I agree. No question about it. My suggestion there is find areas of excellence or find early adoptive organizations and work on it. There's a large company, person's on the call, I won't mention their name, but why can't you take a large company and find pockets and work on those, or find processes and work on that? So you're involved in initiatives, you do it in an agile way. Don't change the company, change a department, change the different divisions or the different projects that you're doing it. Do some experiments, see if it works, take those experiments, leverage, monitor, and merchandise to the rest of the organization.
Excellent. Alan, we have another one. Since organization from Charles Mignosa, since organizations are moving rapidly, can they take the time needed to do Agile properly?
And that's a great question, Chuck. Thank you for putting it together. As an expert, as you are on ISO and the others, I don't think many organizations have a choice other than to move Agile. I presented at the Agile 216 conference, and they closed enrollment at 3,000 people, and all these people were zealots, and there were many young people that only knew Agile and they did it. There are a lot of old timers like myself, and what we saw is a push towards moving Agile. So you're seeing a lot of PMI type of organizations that are saying, hey, we need to go Agile. PMI just put strategy as part of their pillars, one of the 3 chapters, and I feel that large organizations now are adopting it, but it's like eating an elephant, one piece at a time. They have to take the time for some of the places, because I think the groundswell of the organization is going to push it, and other Agile lean companies are coming up and are going to eat their lunch unless they can adapt quickly.
All right, excellent. Alan, we got a couple more here. Let's see if we can take one or two before our time is up. This one is from Mitch Tarr. I'm hearing a big push for systems thinking across our organization. Please speak to alignment of Agile strategy to systems thinking.
Right. Great question, Mitch. As you know, working with a lot of your suppliers, you can't do this in one way. You need to look at all the variables. I showed the Jim Brandrosky systems thinking approach for it. I really feel that you need to take your supplier base and you need to start introducing these concepts. And when you come up with a plan and they say they're going to go to zero defects or whatever it is, you might say, sure, show me how you're going to do it, and say, how is that tied to your bigger initiative? Because if you just piecemeal one part of the organization of your suppliers, it's not going to affect the whole organization, and yet you're going to get a lot of retrenchment. If they're not excited about it, I would encourage them strongly because you hold a lot of the keys. Oftentimes, what you can do in systems thinking is you don't hold them accountable not only for the systems thinking, for the amount of defects, but the process for it. So I would say, what is your process to manage it like you're doing now, and manage and measure them according to their process and whether they're tying in other organizations. Find excuses in their metrics in their organizations to tie in the Agile thinking. Or you can say to them, what are you doing next quarter? What are your breakthrough ideas? I don't need to see them right now, but what ideas are you considering? We have a big expert group in our larger organization. Can we help? So force them to start thinking systematically on how it goes across boundaries and how you can take your resources and offer it to them and make them start thinking not only about the zero defects, but some other concepts that will help your organization. The other option is to say, hey, we are going a new direction. I want to let you in on a new concept that we have. We're not sure if we're going to give you the work, but let me let you in on it. However, we want to know how you can support this from a systems idea.
Perfect. Thank you, Alan. And folks, we only have 2 minutes before we close, so we're not going to be able to take the remainder of the questions, but really quickly, we will take those questions and get answers back to you. What I'd like to do at this time is thank Alan very much for presenting this fantastic, informative webinar. If you would, and Alan, I'm not sure if we have 2 minutes for our call to action. If you just want to spend 1 minute, and then I'd like to ask people to fill out their survey.
Sure. To be agile, Lori, 30 seconds would be great. My suggestion, there are a lot of great questions. I'm looking at the screen, and the idea is, how could you help play a role in this process? What is your role in the organization? What are some ways you could introduce Agile, either gently or forcefully in your organization? So what are some actions you can do to start? And then what else do you need in order to drive these changes? How would you get management involved? How would you get other people doing it? There's no reason you have to have a big campaign to do Agile. You can kind of sneak it in on them. And my suggestion, organizations sometimes do that. Find a good leader, a referent leader in the organization, see one that wants to do that, and do an experiment. There's a very large defense contractor out here in Silicon Valley, and they started doing Agile for government contracts. They didn't tell the government, they didn't tell their organization. They just ran their software part. Now they're involved in the hardware part. They're not calling it Agile. They're still doing EVA, but they're starting to inculcate the organization in those concepts. Back to you, Laura.
Thank you, Alan. Perfect. All right. Thank you again. Fantastic presentation. On behalf of Cobblestone Consulting and Agile Strategy Manager, we thank you for joining us today, and we wish you a great rest of the day. In the meantime, please note we will be sending you a survey. If you could be so kind as to complete that survey and provide that back to us, then we will send you the full slide deck presented today. And thank you for those of you who presented the questions. We'll be doing a drawing and let everyone know who won, the second book. And then you'll get a reminder for the survey. If you have any questions, feel free to contact Alan and myself, and we look forward to providing you our second webinar series in the months to come. So we will we will let you know. So thank you all again, and we wish you a fantastic rest of your day.
And
Bye-bye.